Well, Jesus is a cult.
Yes.
Amen. Anything that's devotional, anything that's excellent, anything that's worthwhile in the world, they're all cult. Music, dancing, acting, sports, educational, high finance, politics. Okay, or there's religious cults like Mormonism, Hindu, Buddhism, Scientology. They're all cults. And so is Christian. Real Christianity is also a cult.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you have to decide which cult you're going to belong to.
That's right.
Everybody who is not a loser is in a cult.
Yes.
Okay. Only the losers they're not in cult.
Hi, besties. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's been a minute since we've talked about Robert Shinn, the pastor slash business entrepreneur slash manager of TikTok dancers slash ex-manager of TikTok dancers slash guy that works and owns real estate companies slash guy that has all these entertainment companies slash a guy that's currently the subject of a federal investigation by the FBI, the U.S. Mail, Postal Services, Investigations Group, the Department of Labor. There's so many different organizations involved here. There was a massive raid on his property that occurred in July, on July 25th, and he is now the subject of a grand jury investigation. How do I know these things? Well, Robert Shinn's FBI raid was front page news all over the media. It was covered in Los Angeles, covered nationally. How do I know that there is a grand jury investigation? Well, Mr. Shinn's attorneys have notified a court in California that there is an active grand jury investigation, and members of his church, including him and several of his mentors, have been subpoenaed to sit before a grand jury. He requested a stay for his case, his civil case, where he is being sued, and he's also suing some individuals. So Robert's suing a former member and some bloggers, along with another member, claiming he has been defamed, that there's this conspiracy to defame him, and everyone is doing this to ruin his reputation. He also claims that a hard drive was allegedly stolen. He claims that he had a consensual relationship with a former member, and now this former member is attempting to extort him for $25 million or something. That's what I can recall off the top of my head. Please don't take that as fact, because Robert Shinn will accuse me again of harming him in the press. So they filed their own lawsuit against him, and they accused him of trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, forced labor, fiduciary fraud, breach of contract, not getting accurate wage claims. There's like 50 some causes of action, and it's a group of defendants that are suing him, including Alicia Lee, who has appeared on the documentary. She was Priscilla. There was Kylie Douglas, who appeared in the series, Kevin Davis, Kalia Gray, Aubrey Fisher, along with other members that were not featured in the documentary. And it was a 3-part docuseries called Dancing for the Devil, the 7M TikTok Cult. Robert was granted a stay in his case in California. And in order to get the stay, his attorneys were provided evidence to the judge that, one, there was a federal investigation that had been opened against him. They confirmed a grand jury is convening or will be convening into him, that members of his church have been subpoenaed for this grand jury, and that if Robert were to speak, or any of these members were to speak, they would basically be forced to possibly incriminate themselves, not necessarily incriminate themselves, but if you're familiar, there are rights afforded to targets of federal investigations, and all investigations really, is that you have a right to remain silent. You do not have to cooperate in any investigation. You can stay as silent as you want. And basically their argument was that they need to be able to stay silent. They are afforded this right under the Constitution, that they don't want to say anything that would impede in this criminal investigation, as well as they wanted to make sure that all of the documents related to the subpoenas that they had received that they submitted to the court, along with their criminal search warrant that they had received, or the search warrant that had been issued by the judge in California. They wanted all of that sealed so as to not expose their personal information and possibly cause them, criticism or shame in the public eye. And because grand juries are sealed and the information that happens in a grand jury investigation are always sealed, the judge agreed. And so right now they were granted a stay, and their next hearing is in December. And so it will be stayed so long as this federal investigation is underway. So when a federal investigation happens, really it can take months, it could even take years. And so once a search warrant is issued, they have to collect all of the evidence, they have to sift through this evidence, then they go to a grand jury and they have to present the evidence to the grand jury. And targets of this investigation have the opportunity to testify or they might be subpoenaed to provide documents, and they can either choose to testify or they can invoke their right to remain silent. So while that grand jury investigation is occurring and the simultaneous federal investigation remains, he is not moving forward in the California court. But that is not stopping him in a Minnesota court from trying to get a permanent injunction against me, or a temporary injunction. A temporary injunction against me for exercising my constitutional right under the First Amendment to a report on public records, to report on public federal investigations that the government has confirmed. A statement was made by a federal investigator that they had executed search warrants pursuant to a federal search warrant, and that this was a collaborative investigation that encompassed multiple federal agencies. Okay. And that because I have reported on my own lawsuit, because I have shared with you information about what has occurred in my lawsuit, because they claim I am misrepresenting what has happened in my lawsuit, and I'm misrepresenting what is happening in their federal case, and I'm sharing my own opinions and providing commentary, that I am harming them in some way that I should be gagged and not allowed to speak. Okay. And interestingly, in their motion for a temporary judgment, or a temporary injunction, in their motion for a temporary injunction, where they claimed that I was falsely accusing them of crimes, where I was reporting on documents that were filed in court in California that clearly stated that a federal investigation was ongoing, that they had been raided, that his attorneys stated they were a target of investigation. They stated that grand jury records are sealed. They stated that they had received subpoenas and required that the subpoenas be submitted. And that because I shared my opinion about what was going on related to the discovery in this case, where they weren't responding, and because the fact that I reported on what everyone else is talking about publicly, by the way, James and Miranda Derrick are now accusing me of making them have to delete their social media. James Derrick, under the penalty of perjury, says this affidavit is being submitted in support of plaintiff's motion for temporary injunction. As of this date of the filing, no criminal charges have been made against me related to the defendant's statements. I deleted my social media presence as a result of the backlash from defendants' increased aggression this year. It says that this was signed in the state of California and they're submitting it in the courts of Minnesota. And the only thing that I've noticed is that it says it's been duly sworn and deposes and states. It does not say at all that it's under the penalty of perjury, and the document is also not notarized. So I can only say from my experience, but when I have filed affidavits in the court, more often than not, I have signed it under the penalty of perjury, and I've also had it notarized. And this here doesn't appear to be either. At least it doesn't say under the penalty of perjury, and there's no notarized signature of a notary. It's interesting that I am being blamed. And by the way, James Derrick has never been named or cited as an individual that's a target of this investigation. No one in this case has implicated James or Miranda Derrick as targets of this investigation. In fact, it was Robert's attorneys, Daniel Guttenplan in California, that Robert, along with several of his mentors at his church, were the targets of an ongoing federal investigation. Miranda Derrick wrote this. The affidavit is being submitted in support of the plaintiff's motion for temporary injunction. As of the date of this filing, no criminal charges have been filed against me related to the defendant's statements. I deleted my social media presence as a result of the backlash from defendants' increased aggression this year. So they cited all of my reporting that was occurring as a result of a federal investigation. And now they are telling a court in Minnesota not that they deleted their accounts because Robert's attorneys had filed a document in court stating that his clients were going to execute their rights under the Fifth Amendment. And by the way, Miranda and James are not named in that lawsuit. Miranda is only named as a witness for that case, and I have never accused Miranda nor James of committing any crimes. Mr. Shinn says this affidavit is being submitted in support of plaintiff's motion for temporary injunction. This is what he wrote. As of the date of this filing, no criminal charges have been made against me related to defendant's statement. As of today's filings, as of September 17th, 2025, he has not been charged. Okay? He's saying that under a penalty of perjury. And as of yet, I have not stated that he has been charged, nor that he has been arrested. But it was his own attorneys that wrote this in a document that they filed in Los Angeles that says plaintiffs and cross defendants face a clear risk of self-incrimination if civil proceedings, including discovery, are allowed to move forward in this matter while a criminal investigation remains active relating to the same facts and circumstances. Indeed, the investigation concerns the same conduct at issue in this civil action, requiring plaintiffs and cross defendants to respond to discovery, sit for depositions, or otherwise litigate their claims and defenses would unfairly force them to choose between protecting their constitutional rights and jeopardizing their position in this case. As the Court of Appeals explained in Pacers, protecting a party's constitutional rights is paramount. They were granted this stay of action in California. Their attorney filed a document that said this on Friday, July 25th, his own attorneys in a court in the state of California. Mind you, his attorney in the state of Minnesota, I don't believe has provided this evidence, and I don't believe has provided a copy of these subpoenas, nor have they provided a copy of any search warrants. And if they did, I wouldn't know because it would be under seal. But his attorneys told a court that was filed in Los Angeles in the early mornings of Friday, July 25th, 2025, multiple federal agencies raided several real properties, seized personal property belonging to cross defendants in connection with at least 5 search warrants executed under Honorable A. Joel Reichlin of the United States Court for the Federal District of California at the request of the United States Attorney's Office. And then they share 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 case numbers for 5 separate search warrants. Okay? And it says these raids made national headline news with countless media outlets such as Fox, ABC, and People covering the raids. Since the raids last Friday, cross defendants have been the subject of incessant media publicity and requests for information tied to the ongoing criminal investigation. These news outlets speculate as to the contents of the search warrants, but none state that they have received copies of the warrants themselves. On July 26, my clients sent me copies of the search warrants that federal authorities served with them. My office reviewed the case numbers listed on the 5 search warrants. Robert says that I have falsely accused him of being arrested, but what I was doing was actually reporting off of a Fox 11 article from California that stated that he had been detained following a raid in Los Angeles. This was published by Fox 11 on July 28th. He cites this in California. It's not cited in the case that they filed against me. So they were going to file under seal. Okay. They filed under seal copies of search warrants that were executed in California Central District Court. They filed a unredacted version of the motion to stay. And then in a separate filing, which was filed by his same attorney, Daniel Gutenplan, and this was filed on July 31st, okay? And it says, these raids included the Shekinah headquarters, the primary residence of Jenny and Abraham Park. These raids were extensive and affected the seizure and search of a myriad of records and property, including the seizure of all telephones and computers related to virtually all of the plaintiffs and cross defendants. They told the court that several branches of law enforcement, including the FBI, executed a coordinated raid on multiple properties associated with the plaintiffs. They allege criminal violations against seemingly all of the parties above for, and then it's all blacked out. They then accused members of the litigants like Melanie Goldman, who's Melanie Lee, that she appeared on a live news broadcast in connection with the events after, and that they were trying to say that Melanie had advanced notice of the raids. I have not spoken to Melanie directly, but almost everyone I've talked to had no clue this was coming. That's how under wraps this was. They wanted the stay because there were upcoming depositions for Shirley Kim, Christina Keller, Robert Shinn, Hannah Shinn, and Shekinah Church. Christina Keller is actually his tax person, and they wanted to stay specifically because her deposition was coming up. And if she were to have to answer questions about the financials, they were concerned that she would be risking her rights under the Constitution of the Fifth Amendment. And so she decided not to. They got the stay. So what I find interesting here is that on the one hand, they tell this court, listen, we need a stay because there's an active investigation. We don't want to self-incriminate. In Minnesota, they want me to take the blame for the litany of output that's come. They don't reference me in California. They don't reference any of my reporting. They don't reference any of the videos I've made. They don't reference any of the posts I've made on social media, nothing. And by the way, this has been an ongoing case since July 25th. And in California, they admit to the court that the subject of the raid has been widely circulated all over the national media. They cite People magazine along with all these other outlets. And they're blaming me for deleting their social media, citing that my aggression and my aggressive attacks of them are the reasons why their social media were deleted. They deleted the social media in mid-August, mid or early August, not long after the raid. There has been intense media scrutiny around this situation since on and off since February of 2022. There was a Netflix docuseries. They call me an informant. It's in Minnesota, I'm the fault, but in California, it appears they're not even mentioning who I am. And I don't know if this is because they don't have the same judge. My case has nothing to do with the federal investigation. I have no criminal complaints against them. Anything I spoke to the FBI about was last year, and it wasn't related to any of the current things that they claim the investigation is under. And so I'm very confused. It seems like I'm the scapegoat here in Minnesota. And by the way, we will respond to this and we will object and we will provide the court whatever we need to show what's happening publicly and in the news. I'm concerned and remain concerned for the individuals involved in this group. I remain concerned for Miranda and James Derrick. I'm more concerned now than ever, given that these declarations don't appear to be physically signed. They are not signed under the penalty of perjury. And his own attorneys, when they sign the affidavits in court, they all sign in California under the penalty of perjury. I'm literally looking at a document right now with his signature that says under the penalty of perjury. These are not signed. They are not under the penalty of perjury, and they're not a physical signature. They're just a typed name. So I don't know who even signed these. They weren't notarized either. So I don't even know who signed these documents. And that's me saying, I don't know. I don't know how valid they are. But that makes me worried even more so. And this feels like a game. And even if I said all of the things I said, I have a right to an opinion. If he's found guilty and he ends up in prison for life, which is what it is, I do hope that if he's in prison and he's found guilty, that he would die in prison. Because if he's convicted of what they're investigating him for, it could be a life sentence for him. That's a fact. I'm worried. I'm worried for these people, but I'm not going to be silenced. And it makes me think that maybe something's coming up in this case. Like maybe the investigation is nearing its wrapping up. Maybe there are deals that are being made. Maybe they're grand jury investigations can take months or years. They can also be quick, but I'm not making up the subpoenas. I'm not lying about the subpoenas. Box 11 said they were detained. Law enforcement admitted all of them were detained while the searches were active, and they were released following the search warrants, and then they were subpoenaed for a federal grand jury, and their own attorneys have stated that there's a likelihood that they could be arrested. What is that? Where am I lying? I'd love to know. All right, you guys, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Will I get silenced? Tell me. Can you believe this? Tell me in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.